Okay, now to the question that I want to ask. You've mentioned the subject of time this weekend several times. And I want to revisit the question that was asked last night about the concept of frequency and the fact that it is a function of time.
Yes.
And I want to get into some more technical detail about that.
All right.
Now, I've been aware for 30-some-odd years that our experience of physical reality is a sequential focusing of our attention on a sequence of different universes, if I'm understanding correctly. Very much in the way that...
In a sense, yes.
Yeah, in the way that motion picture film is a sequence of still frames.
This is, of course, all still an analogy, but it will do as a representative one with regard to the third-dimensional space-time matrix. Yes.
Okay, and I am speaking specifically of physical reality.
Yes, I know.
And within this context, it would mean that within the idea of an infinitude of different universes and different realities and different dimensions is the idea that when we experience movement, what we are actually experiencing is instantaneous shifts from one physical reality, from one dimension, to another one that is very, very close in structure.
Yes.
And going through a whole series of these, just like a series of frames in a motion picture,
correct,
gives the illusion of motion.
Yes.
And that motion gives the illusion of time.
Yes.
Because we do it at a very deliberate pace for the most part, especially when we have a clock that is measuring this, that the movement of a clock really establishes the standard of time.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm correct in my understanding that each of these frames of physical reality is essentially static?
Yes.
Okay. And this gets back to the change and no change idea that we were talking about earlier.
Yes.
Everything is change, but there is no change.
Correct.
Okay. So each of these physical realities is static.
Yes.
And now let's bring in the idea of frequency.
Yes.
Frequency is vibrations per unit of time.
Yes.
But time is the illusion of motion, which is a shifting from one dimension to the next. And I'm wondering exactly how frequency relates to that shifting from one dimension.
The frequency that you create in your consciousness when you create the illusion of time is what determines exactly which frames fall into the slot that give you your sense of continuity. Does that make sense?
I didn't totally get it.
All right. The ideas that you create in your consciousness, the illusion of time, by creating the concept of frequency.
Yeah.
In doing so, once you have created that, it then determines which of the static sequence of parallel realities you actually experience as your continuity of motion. Because let's just say, again, even though I understand there may be shortcomings in third-dimensional language to express this, let's say you choose to operate on a certain frequency within your consciousness.
Okay.
By establishing that frequency, by setting up that illusion of time and frequency, you might choose every third frame, or every second frame, or every fifth frame as your expression of change in space.
Okay.
So the frequency at which you operate determines exactly how you experience the idea of the continuity of motion.
Okay.
Which frames are represented in that sense.
Okay. So would a higher frequency be a skipping of more frames?
Yes.
Okay. But really, there's not really a skipping of frames. It's just
no, not really.
That those frames that you're quote unquote skipping just aren't part of that motion picture of your existence.
Correct.
Okay. Now let's get into the idea of frequency of non-physical beings.
Yes.
Because I understand that they also experience or express a frequency.
To some degree, yes.
Okay. But if they are not experiencing or not focused in physical reality,
yes,
and we've been talking about frequency of progression of attention on frames in physical reality.
Yes.
There
are frames of non-physical reality, too.
Okay. So
they are just of a different quality.
Different quality. What would distinguish the quality that they experience from the quality we experience?
It would be similar to the analogy, perhaps, of having double exposures in each frame, so that you can actually focus on one thing or another in any frame. It's not quite so structured, not quite so limited.
Okay, let me bring into this discussion another technological analogy.
Yes.
Our motion picture frame is, our motion picture film is a series of frames connected together in a sequence, and you can actually cut these.
Yes.
But we have now nonlinear editing,
yes,
an electronic thing, where you can put the frames together in any way you want.
Yes.
And almost set it to go random, and it'll pick frames.
Yes, and this is also a quality of the frames in non-physical reality.
Okay, this is what I'm thinking. What you're describing sounds to me like the nonlinear editing approach.
So you could say physical reality is more linear-based and non-physical reality is more non-linear-based, even though they're both using frames.
Okay, so then getting back to the concept of frequency.
Yes.
Both physicals and non-physicals experience or express the idea of frequency.
Yes.
The non-physicals at the higher frequency,
yes,
I'm getting the idea that means that they are, does it mean that they are experiencing the frames of reality at a higher rate?
It doesn't always mean that, although they can.
Okay.
What it really is more like is the concept of high definition that now exists in your reality. There's more information per frame that they can access.
Okay, and I'm getting that they can probably look at a lot of different frames at the same time.
Yes.
Okay.
Which constitutes the idea of double exposed frames or multiply exposed frames.
Yeah.
From their point of view.
Okay. I was thinking more like a bank of television sets, but I see how
any analogy will work.
Okay,
yes.
I gotcha. Even then, it still implies that there's some kind of the fact that there's a sequentialness to it,
yes,
implies that there's kind of a fundamental idea of time that doesn't necessarily, or rather,
yes, I know where you're going,
is not rigid for the non-physicals, but
yes,
more rigid for the physicals.
Yes. Remember that. anything aside from the one must experience some degree of what you're talking about, or it wouldn't be represented as different from the one.
Thank you. That totally clarifies that whole thing.
It's just a matter of degree.
Yeah. Okay. And in physical reality, at least in our physical reality at this point in time,
yes,
our time is highly structured,
yes,
and very standardized, except for people who are wafting out of it,
yes,
and back into it and that kind of
That's
thing.
what the idea of the increase of your frequency is all about, is you're starting to exist in that quasi-planar reality that is shifting dimensionalities and gives you more access to more information per frame.
Okay. Now, relating this to your experience in your reality,
yes,
I understand that you move around, you may walk from your control chair to the doorway of your spacecraft, so you are experiencing time also.
To some degree, yes. Although we have more facility with allowing it to be more flexible. Yes.
I understand, but if you are actually walking from your chair to the door,
yes,
that is an experience of time,
yes,
and although in the next instant you may be down on the surface of your planet,
yes,
and then back up,
yes,
2 instants later,
yes,
there is the sense of time in that there's actual movement and you can observe movement.
yes.
People walking around on your planet.
We understand it enough to be able to relate to your sense of time, yes.
Okay.
And it is a realm that we ourselves have, at least to some degree, also come up through. We were, in that sense, more structured in the beginning of our evolution than we are now.
Mm-hmm. Were you ever as structured or at least standardized in your experience of time as we are?
No.
Okay.
We were created to be less standardized to begin with.
Gotcha. Okay. I believe that answers my question in its entirety.